So, I think part and parcel why my mother was so strict about there being a divide between at home and our culture and our ethnicity and what we presented and what we allowed others to see once we left the house. At first I resented it. When you're young, you don't understand how things are, and you automatically attribute blame to your parents because they're kind of easy targets and they're safe targets to have. But as I grew up and I started to understand the way the world works, I started to think, and when I started to hear others talk, especially about, other older women who came over and were in the Bronx during that period when there was like this mass migration over from Puerto Rico, I started to think, that my mother probably did experience a lot. I mean, she was already in her teens when she came over. She didn't know English when she came over. It was, her and my grandmother, and, she had all her younger brother and sisters coming. And, it just made me realize that she probably experienced a lot and has a lot of scars that make her very sensitive to her identity and letting others view it, that she feels she wanted to protect us from that. Mm-hmm. She wanted to prevent us from having those same scars and from us being subjected to that same kind of, I can't say what it is because she won't even talk about it. Like in her mind, like that's it, that's the past, and we're not here for that. We're not about that. She wants to talk about where we're going. She wants to talk about the future. She wants to talk about, how well we've done and everything like that. She wants to talk about how, my mother loves to talk about how we're upper middle class. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, Mommy, there are people who make like $500,000, even $1 million a year. She's like, oh, stop it. Those are rich people. And I'm like, no, Mommy. Rich people make multi-million-dollars a year. She's like, oh no, we're upper middle class. I don't know about those people. She's like, well, we are upper middle class.
But how different it must be for your mother than it is for us, in the sense that your mother, my mother was very different in that sense. My mother was always real bocona. But I knew other mothers that if they fell into a situation like that where they felt like they were being discriminated, they stayed quiet because they were afraid of some type of repercussion, or that the fact that, maybe they're right kind of mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the fact is that we're not that generation. We're not that generation that stays quiet. We're not the generation that goes, well, I don't want any repercussions. Not like our mothers who were afraid of that. And you learn to do that in that sense that you always speak up, even if you feel like a little bit of injustice. It's like some people say, don't put that on Facebook. If I see something on Facebook that I take total offense to, I can't stay quiet because then I'm accepting what you just wrote. And you're my friend, I gotta say something. And I think social media does that a lot too, where you feel, some women feel free to put something like that as a Latina on Facebook, but then when you speak to them, no, I'm not getting into that right now. It's too real for them.
But I also think that I appreciate what your mother did though, because what she was trying to do was break the cycle. She didn't want that whole concept of, she was trying to push you as you move forward and you're not going to endure what I endured. A lot of women have scars from repetitive cycles and it just keeps going and going, and she just broke it. She wanted you to go beyond that, and I think that's a great way to look at it, in my perspective, under appreciating your mother. I mean, because I think with our mother though, we had the thing where she didn't learn English till later on in life. We did a lot of translating for her, and I think my parents endured the scar of language a lot, or being Hispanic, when our dad had an accident in the mid-60s, and when it finally went to trial, my mother needed a translator at the trial, and they lost the case because one of the jurors didn't appreciate the fact that my mother needed a translator. So I'm going early 70s. That was still the jury box was not really going to the demographics of my parents. It was going to what the primary demographics of the Bronx were at that time. Mm-hmm. So to me, I always resented that. I think that's when I resented the fact that they discriminated against my parents because we were Latino. But then I boxed that up and I put it away because that happened to my parents. I didn't connect it to me. But yet, I know now as an adult, yes, it's connected to me because my father endured an injury that affected all of us.
But I just think it's amazing that here are, as Latinas here, we didn't grow up in those households where our parents told us, you know, settle for whatever. Because first of all, you're a woman and you're a Latina. And we didn't get that.
No.
You know, so imagine how great our parents were when it came to something like that. Because there's a lot of kids that had that drilled into their head where, you know, you're not gonna get very far.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
You're lucky if you graduated high school.
Yeah, you're lucky, you know, if you get high school, and I know that in my household, my father, like I said, the education thing was so important, and for my mother too, who went as far as 6th grade, you know, and my father who came from a very educated family, that for him, he didn't get that for himself, but all his brothers and his sisters, his father were very educated in Puerto Rico, and he wanted us to follow that footstep. You know, I don't care that you're a woman, I don't care that you're Latina, you're just gonna get an education and you're gonna do what you can with it. You know, and I think that's amazing because
I think so too, because our father, we used to joke around, our father was El Año de la Huaca. He was old timer, he was early 1900s when he was born. He lost his dad young, when he was like 10 years old, I think. So he didn't get the benefit that his older brothers and sisters got. He wanted to be a dentist. I remember dental tools in his toolbox. Because he wanted, I think he wanted, but he never spoke about it. Because
it wasn't an opportunity that he was given.
He didn't have that opportunity. He had to make amends for himself.
But he never relayed to us the fact that we were females.
No.
He saw us like, you know what, everyone's on the same playing field. And he never did that to us. And mommy either.
No.
Never did that to us.
But you know, it's funny, like, because growing up, my mother did want us, and my father did too. My father was also a big proponent of education. You know, whenever I asked a question that he didn't know, you know, it's clear that he was part of their push toward education was because of their own insecurity, because they knew that they didn't know and they knew what a hindrance was to them. So if I asked my father a question and he didn't know it, he'd be like, don't you listen in school? Didn't they tell you that in school? And I'm like, huh? No, they don't talk about that. I'm like, we do like math and science. They don't talk about, you know, like whatever question it was, no matter what the topic was, if it was something that they didn't know, they would automatically like accuse me of not paying attention to school. Be like, what did we send you there for? What are you doing over there?
Right.
And you know, similarly, when you know, they would always tell me, oh, you gotta get good grades because you're gonna get a good job and you're gonna be like, you know, you're gonna be doing, you know, you're gonna be, you know, it was always like, you're gonna be high class this, high class that. And I was like, yeah, but what do I do? So I go to school and then what? Like I go to school and I get these good grades and I have A's. And then what's next?
Right.
And then the answer would be, didn't you pay attention in school today? And I'm like, but they don't tell you that. They don't say what it is. And my mother would say, oh no, you're gonna have like those jobs like on TV. And I'm like, but what are those jobs? She's like, I don't know, but didn't you see, like, and this is like back in the day with Melrose Place. So she's like, didn't you see? And I'm like, Mommy, all they ever do is sit on the phone and talk about their personal business and then they leave the office. And she's like, oh no, you see how they dress? And you see those offices? She's like, you're gonna need to get one of those jobs. And I'm like, but Mommy, I don't think those are real jobs. I'm like, I can't see, how did they get paid like that? They go in, they talk about personal business and then just leave. I'm like, they don't ever say what they're doing. And she'd be like, oh, I don't know. And then my dad's answer would be like, well, that's why you need to pay attention when you're in school. And so I had no idea like what that meant. You know, like what it used to, so like dentistry, it wasn't like you could become a dentist. That was like, that's crazy talk. But it was like, you're gonna do business. Well, what's business?
Right.
They didn't know. They had no idea what business was or what those professions were called.
I mean, I never ventured that I was gonna get to the point where I'm at. But because our thing was learn typing, work in an office, educate yourself, and then you figure it out from there. And then, like you're like, so what does that mean? Where am I going? And then you start going through all these careers in your mind, and you're like, do I see myself doing that? But I always associated, do I see myself doing it? Not because I thought of, oh, Latina's not. I always thought about the female perspective. Can a female do that? But then as you get on and go on, you say, yeah, a woman can do anything, right? But then that's when will I be stopped because I'm Latina? Will I have that affect me in any way? But then you just,
Well, the difference between, I think, our parents, especially with girls, and us being parents. I know my parents their thing was making money. Success is associated with money. And I teach my daughters different. Where I don't want them to go into a job because they think they're gonna make this money. And as a Latina, you gotta really, really strive. No, I want you to get into something that you feel passionate about. I don't care what it is, but I want you to feel a passion for it, that when you get up in the morning, you say to you, I love my job, well, I love what I'm doing. I don't want you to wake up and say, well, I need to make that $20,000 for the month or whatever. And I don't want that for them, you know? It's like, it's different. Where our parents geared us more, their idea of success was making all money. Just make money, have the money come in, you know?
making money and having the career.
Yeah, but again, I think that, you know, like, especially like for my parents, it was that association of the Latino identity with this lower socioeconomic group,
Exactly.
that they genuinely believed that everyone who was successful because of merit. And so they believed that once I got the education, that was it. And once I had the skill set, then that was it. So I had everything I needed. If I failed, it was just because I hadn't been paying attention and I really hadn't been as well equipped as they thought I was, because it's a meritocracy.
You were thinking about Melrose Place at that moment.
Exactly. I was like, well, look at this. You graduated last week. You still don't even have the Melrose Place job, and clearly you didn't do as well. And I'm magna cum laude. I don't believe it.
Didn't pay off for you.
Exactly. That was their mind, and you know, in their mind, it, you know, the world and America, it really was a meritocracy. So once you got the education, if you had obstacles, it wasn't because you were like, you know, it was because, you know, like you actually weren't smart enough. And so I think too, like that was like a kind of cycle for them.
Right.
You know, like they then attributed those same things and that same thing to beat themselves up. Like their own failures were their failures, not because there were systemic and institutional obstacles presented to them, but because they themselves were deficient. And so because of their self-deficiency, that's why they couldn't excel.
Right.
So that's why it was necessary for us to be different from them. We had to be like distinguishable.
I guess for me it will be a little different, only for the perspective I don't have kids. I'm still under 30. But it's
Those 4 weeks.
it's different in a way, because even growing up, it wouldn't be, they understood to a certain extent that you always had to study. However, it was very difficult when you're the first one going through a lot of these processes, the first one going through everything. And also being a product of the public system, of always attending anything to do with public, until I attended college, that I was able to go into a private college institution. However, when they didn't understand, sometimes they'll say, well, pay attention, but for the other part, like, do you need somebody to help you? Do you need somebody? So at that time, my parents were local grocery owners. So they would get the delivery guy that was fairly good with math, because he had to be good with math since he was the one bringing all the products into the store. Oh, you're really good. You know, she's not this good in this part. Can you tell her we pay you? Can you tell her each hour? So they'll pay this local guy that we knew for years to help me with the math part.
Wow.
So then when I would come home, oh, Mom, I got a 96. What happened to the 100? Why? We got the tutor. What happened? And I remember one time, it was incredibly hard. I got, it was in English, and I had this professor who was amazing. And at that time, she was an NYU professor as well, but you'll get the loan forgiveness if you taught at a public school, and she was my professor. At that time, I got a 106. My mom responds, what happened to the 110? I'm like, there was only 6 points for extra credit. I got the 100, only 6 points. But even going through that, it's extremely hard, because I remember applying even for college. At that point, they said, well, your best options are BCC, BMCC.
Wow.
Even applying to Mount St. Vincent was out of the question for them. And I remember it was this, we had a nurse at the time, and I was working for the nurse, she was the one who actually told me, no, try other parts, try this, try that. She called my mother and her agreed, try these schools. So that's when I was able to apply to the one that I went to and this one, but they understood the concept that sometimes it's harder because you are Latino. It's harder because your family is not here for generations. You are the first generation. they to some extent understood that you can only go so far if you only know so far. So it's not your fault because you're naive to a point because you just don't know how to go to the next step.
Right.
And they weren't hard on themselves because they didn't know how to tell me what was the next step. But they were really quick in asking the neighbor or asking whoever will come in, what is the next step? How can we help her? How can she go this far? How can she study? But school, I remember even when going through law school, it's like what, like 7.5 years, you'll have all your family even calling, you're still in school? Wow, do you need anything? Do you want us? Come and visit us, we'll support you. It was this huge support system because they just didn't know, but they were proud of someone just at least going through the process and becoming the first attorney in the US and becoming the one who actually passed the bar. So even now they don't understand what is it, but they're very proud of knowing. So in that regard, they were a little different because they knew being on a thing that does hinder you if you don't know your history or how to grow, how to pursue, what role models do you have if you don't have a role model in your field, how to get there. So they will always tell me, I remember when I got my first internship for with a judge, I remember it was like yesterday, my mom would tell me, you have to go up there and ask. If you don't ask, nothing's happening to you. Come on, let's pray. So the lady will always be praying. Always, she lives on her knees to this day. So come on, you just have to go ask. You have to dress to par. If you're never dressed to par, then you will not even be considered because you will be looked down upon other than your last name.
Right.
So I guess to there, they really didn't know how hard it really was, but they were always the one who instilled in me, you have to be outspoken or else you'll get nowhere. And the least that they can say is no. And when they tell you no, you still go home, you still have a warm cooked meal.
But look at it, but in a way, think about it, your mother was, because for your mother to reach out to people that you probably didn't even know that well. Do you know that? Because my daughter, she didn't care. She really went out there, she was an advocate for you, and what she was teaching you to do, to be an advocate for yourself as a Latina. You know, because she wasn't gonna always be around to do it for you.
No.
So she was actually your first example. I think that's amazing.
And then also to agree with you, it's not based on money. So even to this day, money doesn't give you success, it doesn't give you happiness,
Not at all.
it doesn't give you even the merit that you need. Because if you don't love what you're doing and if you're not helping others, then you haven't gained success.
Exactly.
And then if you wake up every day and you're not doing something that makes you happy, regardless if you're getting 6 figures, if you're getting the 300,000, that's not a job. She's not happy for you because you're not happy. And the only way that you can be happy is by giving to others or working in something that makes you so passionate that your eyes light up and that you
Right.
just speak so eagerly. But I think that is success.
Yeah,
Something that
I
you're
agree.
saying.
Yeah.